Shahd Abusalama, thank you for joining me. Always good to see you. You are an academic, an artist, an activist, a proud Palestinian. Counterfire regulars will know you from the fantastic contribution that you made to the Palestinian Cultures of Resistance panel that we hosted last year. And I'm sure that many of them will have also recently come across the hashtag in support of Shahad campaign. So tell us, what's the situation that you find yourself in that has given rise to that campaign?
Yeah, thank you, Dave, for hosting me. And I'm also extending thanks to everyone who supported me throughout this crisis. So I had just submitted my PhD in the historical representations of Palestinian refugees between 1917 and 1993. And I had just also been appointed as an associate lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University to teach the module post-colonial media culture. And it's worth reflecting here about how the module and the theories that we discuss in post-colonial media culture, such as Orientalism, the Frantz Fanon, and the psychology of the oppressed, the psychology of the colonized versus the colonizer, how all these intersect so deeply in my own personal history, but also my academic research and what I'm going through right now with the demonization and the silencing that I have been facing. It came as a shock, really. It came as a slap on the face from my university when I was suspended. But the run up to this suspension was especially stressful because I was kept in the dark when I had learned from Zionist publications that my university is investigating me. And my university, Sheffield Hallam, had left me completely in the dark for nearly a month between the publishing of the article by Jewish News on Christmas Eve. Literally, that's how they gave me Merry Christmas. And then the suspension that happened on the 20th of January, few hours before I was going to meet my students for the second time only. And the email didn't like consider how that is going to fall on my ears. Like, I felt punished. I felt disrespected. And I felt like I was reduced to no person with no rights. And unfortunately, this has been confirmed in my communication with the university later. I met them last Thursday, and of course I went there with the spirit of the accuser, not the accused. They have done me wrong in so many different ways, Dave. I found myself caught up in a net of like bureaucratic and political injustice. And that's why we have a UCU motion, an emergency motion that that I'm going to discuss with Sheffield Hallam UCU shortly to try and expose all these injustices and to ensure as well that no one have to go through this and no one should be treated like this.
So the reasons for
So
sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. There's a slight delay on the line, isn't there? but the reasons for your suspension were completely unclear at the beginning. Is that still the case? It was an anonymous accusation of some sort that's undisclosed that was made?
External. It was external, and basically all these publications by the Jewish news, followed by the campaign against anti-Semitism, followed by the Jewish Chronicle, are basically founding the evidence that the university is holding against me. And all of them are citing the IHRA definition that deliberately, as we all know, conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism to quill people like me and censor us.
Yes,
And protect Israel from accountability. And it's funny that we talk today, a day after the Amnesty International had just published a report condemning Israel of apartheid. And these apartheid policies and settler colonial policies that had led to me being born in a refugee camp in Gaza that is as old as the Zionist state. And these things that have been released by the Amnesty International, it's what the Palestinians have been talking about for more than 7 decades. And we're finally being heard. Last year, B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization, published a similar report. And now Amnesty. And finally, the world is actually listening to the Palestinians and their valid grievances, and is seeing that no injustice is sustainable. And it cannot be acceptable that we maintain this apartheid regime, this settler colonial regime, at the expense of the Palestinians' dehumanization and dispossession that is continuing today in Sheikh Jarrah, in Naqab, in all over Palestine. And let's not forget as well the firm racist denial of Palestinian refugees, 5 million of us, to our rightful lands. So this, when we say that Zionism is racism, we're basically just summing up the experience that Palestinians were born into, being treated as subhumans, as foreigners in their own lands, by the settlers, Yaqub. I mean, let's think about Yaqub a little bit. Yaqub, who's been sharing the house of Mahmoud al-Kurd, and Muna al-Kurd in Sheikh Jarrah. He's an extremist Zionist Jew who's coming from the US and has even told Muna to her face, if I didn't steal your home, someone else will. And let's also remember that those publications who are chasing me, a Palestinian who managed to break free from Israel's oppression only to be chased beyond the occupied territories. This publication is chaired by people who also chair the Jewish National Fund, one of the leading settler colonial organizations in Palestine since the early 20th century. And until today, they are opening parks on top of erased Palestinian villages, dispossessing thousands and thousands of Palestinians in the process. And we know that Israel has been hijacking the discourse of human rights, and they hijacked everything, every system that the world came up with to preserve humanity and to preserve human rights. And we see them, for example, we see the Jewish National Fund, for example, claiming to be environmentalist. Where is the Palestinian environmental justice when our homes are being erased and we are being eliminated in order for Jewish-only developments
And just to be clear,
to be available?
just to be clear for anyone who is watching this video or reading this interview, that simply to raise any of these matters, to make any of these completely legitimate complaints and objections about the various policies of the Israeli state, to do those things means that under the IHRA definition, with examples of anti-Semitism, that you will be labelled anti-Semitic, and people should know that those IHRA definitions have been heavily criticised by legal experts, by human rights groups, by many Jewish groups, and so on, and yet they have also been adopted by many institutions in Britain, including Sheffield Hallam University. So what's the latest?
I would like to comment here that it should be called out that the government of this country had violated universities' autonomy by forcing them to adopt such a political tool and threatening even with funding cuts if they didn't adopt it by a certain deadline. And this is shameful, and this is like, it shouldn't be welcomed in an academic institution. And I don't know if this happened before. It sounds to me that it is unprecedented that the government would interfere with university business in that way in order to criminalize people like me. I mean, we have just seen a clear example of this, basically embodied in me. My university had just adopted the IHRA, and the first person to use the IHRA against is a Palestinian member of its own staff who's teaching its own students. And the university, instead of standing by my side and stepping up to its duties of care toward its own students and staff members, they sided with the Zionist press.
Yeah. But under the pressure,
and they even disrupted the students' education. And I was teaching 30 students, around 30 students. They chose to disrupt my life and the students' education just to appease Israel.
but just to be clear, that that under the pressure of your campaign, the university has partially backed down. They have offered to reinstate you now, but am I right in saying the investigation continues? Bring us up to date with your situation.
Yeah, so it is a step in the right direction that they have reinstated me by immediate effect when I last met them, because they have acknowledged the internal errors that led to this. They literally treated me as if I didn't exist. And when the first complaint came to them, apparently I wasn't registered in their system as an associate lecturer. And so they treated me as if I have no rights, as if I didn't exist. And it's just shocking that, you know, when I think about this, I cannot believe this has happened. They had backed down in terms of the reinstation, but not in terms of the investigation. So they are still willing to take those complaints seriously. And I'm arguing that how is it possible that you should take this seriously when they are citing the IHRA that is, as we said, it's flawed, it has been criticized by so many people, including Jews and academics, and and all this goes dismissed, including my own lived experience, the Palestinians' lived experience, that is completely dismissed. And if I agree to go into an investigation that would have the IHRA as a definition, then the outcome is going to be inherently discriminatory. Let's remember that one of the examples that the IHRA flags as anti-Semitic is calling Israel or Zionism a racist endeavor. But unfortunately, this is our experience. And how can you justify Israel being founded a day after the British troops are withdrawn from Palestine, on top of an ethnically cleansed Palestine? At that time, 78% of Palestine was completely depopulated and destroyed in an act of memoricide. And the genocide continues today in the frequent bombardment of Gaza, and the frequent bombardment of Gaza in the unlivable situation that has lasted far too long, with no accountability and no justice served to the Palestinians. And what we are trying to do is reverse this international failure to hold Israel to account. We know that the government's policies, even Britain has its own policies that condemns the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories. Like, why not at least listen to their own policies and respect their own policies, respect the
And of course,
international conventions that they themselves were signatory to?
you mentioned,
And I just wanted to say that the fact,
sorry, there's a long delay on
sorry,
the line.
do you still hear me?
I can. You continue, please.
We have to mention that the fact that they are coming after a Palestinian stateless refugee who literally simply dared to call for her freedom, justice, and equality, and to chase her in this low manner. I have written extensively about Palestine for more than a decade. My blog, Palestine from My Eyes, had started in 2010. I was 19. And by that time, I had already survived multiple attacks on Gaza, with bombs falling meters away from my home. And I myself lost dear family members and friends and neighbors. And for them to chase me using the IHRA, it just confirms what they don't want us to state. They don't want us to state that Israel is a racist endeavor, and the fact that they are using this political tool to silence me and protect Israel from accountability for its well-recorded and well-researched crimes, that itself confirms it.
Let me ask you this, Shahd, please. You mentioned that you have a meeting later today with your union, the UCU. What can we do? What can people watching this video do to support your campaign for justice on this?
I'm asking them to continue writing in support of Shahd, and to write to the university asking for this farcical investigation to be dropped and the complaints to be discarded, and for finally to stand on the right side of history, on the right side of the oppressed, not the oppressor. And let's remember Desmond Tutu's words. If you are neutral in clear cases of injustice, then you have chosen the right of the oppressor. And in this case, there isn't neutrality. There is actual silencing that is happening, and even academia, where decolonizing research and anti-racist campaigns such as the ones I'm leading on and participating in should be welcomed. And so the university needs to drop the investigation, acknowledging that it had started on a wrong foundation, and I'm also demanding a public apology that recognizes all this massive support that I've received internally, internationally, on a student level, on a UCU level, on an academic level, on so many levels. And I am sure that the support that I have received overshadows the Zionist complaints it's not even compared. And since the university had already made my issue in the public domain by discussing my business with those acting in bad faith against me to silence me, then the university needs to be able to make a public apology, because they had already engaged in my business publicly. I had learned, let's remember, I had learned about their investigation from the Zionist press. So I am asking them to publicly apologize, recognizing this amazing show of solidarity that had attracted so many people, multi-faith, multi-international justice lovers around the globe. And if they refuse to do this, which looks likely, then I would like people to note it as a sign of hypocrisy and a sign of academia failing the oppressed, failing the colonized. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And let me express solidarity on behalf of all the Counterfire members, and thank you so much for making time to speak with me this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much.